Hi, my name is Christian Devine and welcome to RetroView, a safe zone for physical media. At a time when companies like Best Buy have decided to no longer carry physical media except for games, it's even more important to hold on to your physical media where you may and while you may. And so in the spirit of Shocktober, I'm going to be looking at a recent 4K release of one of my favorite zombie films of all time, Bob Clark's 1972 zombie comedy Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things.
It's party time. It's the shank of the evening. My friend Orville and I are having cocktails in 10 minutes at my island cottage.
Oh, yes. The children had such a lovely time. It's too bad nobody ever told them children shouldn't play with dead things.
I'm going to be talking more about zombie films when I do a retro review on George Romero's Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead at some point this Shocktober. But I wanted to focus on Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things because it is one of my top 5 zombie films, and in no particular order those are Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, Lucio Fulci's Zombie, Nightmare City, The Living Dead at the Manchester Morgue, Shaun of the Dead, and what I believe is the first zombie comedy. It's arguable if it is or it isn't, but I can't think of any film that combines this kind of humor and horror. I love zombie movies, zombie games. I've even written for the games Dying Light, Stay Human, and so it's one of my favorite genres in media. And I love it whenever a zombie film does something unique and different. And Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things definitely does that in spades. A quick bit of background on Bob Clark, who directed the film under the name Benjamin Clark, just in case the film didn't quite work out in the public eye. And it's part of his horror quadrilogy that was started with Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, followed up by his Vietnam era version of The Monkey's Paw, the very disturbing Death Dream, with special makeup effects by a young Tom Savini, and then followed by Deranged, a horrific documentary style telling of the Ed Gein murders, which were also the basis for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and followed by his magnum opus horror film and his last horror film, 1974's Black Christmas. And of course, it's amazing that the man who brought us Porky's would also bring us Christmas Story, one of the most beloved seasonal films of all time. So not only did Bob Clark make one of the scariest Christmas movies ever made, he also made one of the most heartwarming. Now that's range. And in fact, John Carpenter and Bob Clark were scheduled to work on a film together called Prey right after Black Christmas. It was a script by John Carpenter, kind of a female version of Deliverance, and Bob Clark was to direct it. And apparently they were very heavily into pre-production with only a few weeks away from shooting when Warner Brothers canceled it at the last minute, which is a shame that we never got to see the Bob Clark-John Carpenter collaboration. But Bob Clark ended his horror career basically with Black Christmas. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things was shot over a couple-week period for $50,000, which is very low budget, and at a time when it wasn't that common for indie horror movies, or indie films even, to come out and be distributed. But Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things actually got it distributed in America and Canada, and it did quite well, particularly in Canada. And that was how Bob Clark kind of got the money for his next series of films, including actually the film that put him on the cultural map in the 1980s.
Porky's, you too will be back for a second look. Rated R.
Which I have still never seen to this day, And like Deranged, I will never see Porky's except for a different reason, because it always struck me as utterly stupid, and the scenes I've seen from it just make me confirm that I never want to watch Porky's out of respect to Bob Clark, although I'm very happy that it made him a lot of money. Although Porky's 2 the next day, I have seen chunks of it for some reason. I think it was on HBO one night, and there is a incredibly funny zombie scene that is a direct, I wouldn't say direct, but definitely a tribute to Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which makes sense since Alan Ormsby also co-wrote Porky's 2 the next day. Alan Ormsby would go on to have a quite interesting career as a screenwriter of really terrific coming-of-age films like My Bodyguard, and also the big-budget remake of Cat People directed by Paul Schrader. And he also created the amazing, strange Hugo doll from the 70s. I don't even know what to say about that. But he seems like a really interesting character, and I think he definitely underrates his performance in the film and the impact of this film. Alan Ormsby and Bob Clark did work on one more horror film called Popcorn, which came out in 1991, which is a very troubled production. Alan Ormsby was the original director of it, and then he was replaced by one of the actors from Porky's, and Bob Clark also did some uncredited directing on the film. But it's a really fun mess of a film that you should definitely check out, and definitely is kind of a nice summation of Bob Clark and Alan Ormsby's earlier horror work. And sadly, Bob Clark is no longer with us. He was killed in a drunk driving accident with his son in 2007, and he'd actually been working on a remake of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things at the time. And it would have been fascinating to see what he would have brought back to the genre that he helped to create. And I'm going to be going into some spoiler details about the film, so hopefully you'll watch it and then come back, or hopefully you can just enjoy this review. I won't give away everything, but enough that you definitely should watch the film so there's some surprises. The plot of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is pretty simple. It's about an amateur theatrical group that goes out to an island cemetery to dig up a body to perform an arcane satanic ritual. And there's no reason for them to go out there to perform this disturbing ceremony, except for the fact that the leader of the troupe, Alan, also portrayed by Alan Ormsby, the co-screenwriter and makeup artist, is an asshole, and also one of the most obnoxious lead characters in the history of genre cinema. And that's all to the good for me. We'll talk more about his performance during the retro review. And all of the lead actors are actually named after themselves. So that's very interesting, but it creates kind of a meta vibe to the film and gives their characters kind of an intimacy also. And of course, the ceremony works a little too well. I first became aware of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things seeing a little picture of it in a fanzine called Cinefan. And I always remember the title and the macabre poster art. And I thought that was a great title for a movie, and kind of a disturbing title. It sounds like a scary movie title. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. It sounds scary, but a little funny too. Part of the charm, I guess, of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is the fact that the first part of it is ostensibly a comedy of manners. And over the years, there's been some controversy over the film. Some people do not like it because of the lead and the low-budget quality of it, while others, like me, absolutely appreciate the DIY unique qualities of the film, and particularly Alan Ormsby's performance. And over the years, it's been quite a public domain film, available on various formats. And it wasn't until the late 90s that there was a very nice clamshell VHS widescreen version put out by the late, great Anchor Bay. and there's been a few other iterations over the years since then, and most recently VCI put out a Blu-ray of it around 2014, and then last year VCI released the 4K version of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And VCI is not known for their mastering necessarily, and we don't know the source of the print of this, and it's not HDR, it's SDR, so it's still not even pulling out necessarily all the quality of the image. But you have to go into this film knowing that even though it was shot in 35mm, it is a low budget film, and the photography and the lighting is going to be indigenous of that. And frankly, the film, you know, it's been definitely murky viewing, and if you've seen it on, you know, bad prints, but you can see everything that's happening in general. And even with these new versions, which still are not perfect, you can definitely see everything going on, and it looks just fine. And it's still very stylish even for the low budget. So when I really sat down to watch it, when I got the first clamshell widescreen, I really immediately just fell in love with the film. And if John Waters made a zombie movie, it would be Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, because I think of Alan Ormsby as kind of a variation of David Lochary, who was the lead in many of John Waters' films before he passed away.
We rarely eat any form of noodle, Don, but I'll take a tiny portion, to be polite, with cheese, please.
And he's just got that same exact total bitch attitude, and it's merciless in the film.
You know what you are? You're a slab of meat I hired to dress my stage, and I like my sides of beef to hang quietly in the corner until I need them. So why don't you just shut up?
Another thing I like about it is that this is a very, I don't want to say realistic troupe of actors, but if you know anything about actors, if you hung around a theater group, you will know these people. And they're very sincere and pretentious and dedicated, as theatrical groups are. And I really do like this little inside look at this world. And also there's even two gay characters, and they're presented as part of the troupe and not made fun of. Everybody gets their little moment to be made fun of in the sense of as people, but they're characters and they're part of the group. And it's for this, once again, for 1972, it's a little more progressive than characters, gay characters are usually shown in film. I really do like all of the actors in the film and the characters they play, and I particularly like the fact that there's a nice ratio of female to males, and the women are very dominant in the film, particularly Valerie Mamchez. And she's really great. She's the one that actually kind of invokes the satanic ritual to raise the dead, because Alan just doesn't have the moxie.
Get out of the grave, Alan. Let an artist show you how to call a curse down on Satan.
And so the first hour of the film is basically a comedy, and then the last half hour becomes a real genuine zombie movie. And that's what I love about the film, and that's what some people don't love about the film. I love films that have these kind of unique tonal shifts, and definitely you can see probably Tarantino was influenced by this in From Dusk to Dawn, and maybe a few other films. And I'm not saying the comedy works. I think it works in the nature of who these characters are. But if he's got any auteurist tick, there is a moment in almost every single Bob Clark film where characters start to laugh uncontrollably about something, and the laughter is repeated, or the joke is repeated as the laughter rises and rises. I'm telling you, it's in almost every single Bob Clark film, and the genesis of it is certainly in Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And also the genesis for not only Black Christmas, but possibly Christmas Story. And once again, Alan Ormsby is such a megalomaniac asshole that he's utterly compelling to me, especially since you know he's going to get exactly what he deserves at the end of the film. Once the zombies do rise, the film becomes genuinely, to me, scary. And it has one of the best dead rising scenes in genre history. And also, this is one of the first films that came out after George Romero's 1968 Night of the Living Dead to really play up the modern zombie. There really hadn't been that actually many ripoffs of Night of the Living Dead. And so Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things is one of the actual first kind of scions of the genre. And there's a fantastic moment at the end of the film when Alan actually uses one of the characters as a shield to protect himself from the zombies. And even the zombies look at Alan like, "Are you serious?" And it's a great moment. And it's the moment that really made me fall in love with the movie. Carl Zicherer's music score is very effective and creepy, and definitely is part of what makes the film scary or creepy if you find it as such. And I guarantee if you were to watch Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things at midnight with the lights out, you would be creeped out just by that score. And Bob Clark is kind of a master of using sound and music to unnerve you. And if you've seen Black Christmas, you know that those phone calls are the creepiest phone calls in movie history. And it's because of that strange sound collage. And there's definitely elements of that in this. So there's all these little bits and pieces that work to make the film, truly scary. And Bob Clark obviously knows what he's doing, and his direction gets better and better through the film. And I think Alan Ormsby's zombie makeups are very effective. And what's interesting is the film is rated PG, so don't go in expecting a big gore fest. There's certainly some nice little moments of shock and blood, but that's not what this film is about. It doesn't need it, frankly. It's a scary, creepy film. It's not a gory, bloody film. I think the film has been misunderstood over the years, even though it's definitely developed a cult following. Obviously, if there's a 3-disc set, there are other fans out there besides me. And I once again think a lot of people blame Alan Ormsby's lead performance, but he's supposed to be a jerk. He's supposed to be an asshole. It doesn't mean that the character works or that the acting is all great, but I accept it once again as the part of the DIY charm of the film. And somebody posted online that he looks like a giant human juicy fruit striped gum, which he does. I love his outfit. And that helps certainly distinguish the film in the darkness, because these characters' outfits are very 70s. Now, as far as the actual 4K, it comes with a slipcover, which I actually quite like. That's a pretty cool slipcover. I'm usually, like I said, I'm a fan of having the original art, but if you don't have the original art, that's pretty cool. And then there's this cover, which I think is quite terrible. And it might be from some version of a poster, but the original poster design is actually also by Alan Ormsby, and I quite like it, and it's very cool and creepy, and I think it perfectly sums up the kind of macabre vibe of the film. But this is a 3-disc set, which is amazing. 1 UHD, 2 Blu-rays. There's a great 90-minute documentary called Dreaming of Death, Bob Clark's horror films. There's a Alan Ormsby Q&A video. There's a commentary by Alan Ormsby and the cast. Trailers, more interviews, Q&As, memories of Bob Clark photo galleries, music videos, radio spots and trailers. And so you couldn't ask for more good stuff on a disc like this. Now, in terms of the picture quality, this, if you go online, you're going to definitely see some people who have done some comparisons. And in this case, the picture quality looks a little bit lighter than the Blu-ray, and that may be good or bad. Like I said, we don't know the source of the 4K negative, so it's hard to say if it could look better or not. I assume it could, and I think probably at some point there might be another company that'll, do an HDR version of this, because SDR still is not going to pull out all the information they could. I don't think this is ever going to look, fantastic or even as great as the Second Sight Dawn of the Dead 4K. It looks fantastic to me. It's very clear, and there's some points when it looks just incredibly sharp, and it's hard to believe you're watching this 1972 film that cost $50,000. So I highly recommend you pick up the 3-disc set of Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. If you are a fan of the film, and if you watch it and become a fan, it's certainly worth owning. So once again, thank you for retro viewing. Please like and subscribe, or I'll send Alan over to teach you why children shouldn't play with dead things. Or should they?
Boogie, 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 boogie.